The ketogenic diet I don't really consider it a diet. I really think of it as a metabolic process, and you're fixing this broken metabolism that most people in this world have. The root of most chronic diseases not only is inflammation, but it's something called insulin resistance. And that is when your body cannot use carbohydrates any longer for energy. So when your body can't use carbohydrates for energy, they begin to store. They begin to store as what we call visceral fat in your liver, in your pancreas, around your organs, and that is the really bad fat. That is the fat that creates inflammation itself, and that is the fat that really wreaks havoc on your health, on your metabolic health. So what the ketogenic diet does is it really fixes that metabolic state. So as I say, I never consider it a diet. Yeah, it is a way of eating, but it really is a metabolic process that your body is undergoing to get to optimal metabolic health.
It was originally studied in the early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, for children with epilepsy. It was never meant to be a fad diet, ever.
And again, of course, because we are so weight-centric in the United States, every diet is then kind of extrapolated to weight loss. That being said, it's true that if you eliminate a huge category of food, namely carbohydrates, that you're going to lose weight, right? Particularly when our society gets the bulk of our calories from carbohydrates. By some estimates, 80% of the American diet comes from carbohydrates. And we're not talking about asparagus, right? We're talking about Pop-Tarts. So if you eliminate that huge category of primarily processed foods, of course you're going to achieve weight loss. And when you achieve weight loss, you see benefits to health. Blood sugar goes down, cholesterol goes down, blood pressure goes down, we sleep better, ovulation is enhanced. I mean, there are so many benefits.
When it comes to the keto diet and the certain benefits, there can be benefits in terms of blood sugar regulation. So you have somebody who might be pre-diabetic and they're trying to get their blood sugar under control, and so they go on something like the keto diet and try to get their blood sugar under control. So those kinds of things. I've heard some anecdotal things about people with autoimmune diseases getting things under control and things like that. Mostly people turn to it for weight loss.
So once you lower your carbohydrate intake to a low enough level, it's usually around 40 to 50 grams of total carbohydrates a day, your body will start to understand that it no longer can use carbohydrates for energy. The process of entering ketosis takes about 4 to 7 days. So it's a little bit of a slow process. Once you start taking the carbohydrate away, your body will use up all the carbohydrates that's in storage in your body. Once that is gone, your body says, okay, where am I going to get my energy from? There are only two sources of energy that your body can use: glucose from carbohydrates and fat and ketones, either from eating fat or from your own fat. So some people start to feel that they're going into ketosis. If you're not eating the right things and you're not sometimes supplementing with electrolytes, you'll feel something called the keto flu. So you'll know because your body is shifting its source of energy. For most people, the last time they were in ketosis was at birth. We are born in ketosis at birth. So if you've never fasted and if you've never lowered your carbohydrate intake to a low enough amount, your body has never been in ketosis.
One of the things with eating a lot less carbs and more fat, or the keto diet as some call it, there's also different variations of it. One of the issues is that you're almost switching the way that your body burns stuff. So if you're not giving it any carbs, it needs a source of energy. So whenever you feed it a lot of fat, that becomes the source. But one of my main issues with it is that living the way that we do today, it's hard to completely go all in on that type of diet. Every restaurant that you go to, they're mostly based on a carb-centric diet. Now, carbs aren't bad. Carbs are a great source of energy if you're eating the right ones. So whenever people try to be like keto for a weekend or keto for a couple weeks just to drop weight, they end up just failing because your body actually has to go into full ketosis. That means burning all the carbs in your system. And then the system, you're going to feel like crap as you're running out of energy. And then all of a sudden your body will switch gears, start burning the fat. Now you're running on the fat. Then you feel great. Then you just got to keep feeding yourself fat. One of the problems is once you integrate carbs back into the system, now it just goes switch back to that. And now you just have a really crappy high fat diet, and it just doesn't make sense. But if you're super committed and it can be attainable for your lifestyle, then it is a great alternative, but it's certainly not for everybody.
Because so much of our brain is made up of fat, and so you're starting to see it with more and more, because it kind of came back because it was, it didn't have a lot of popularity. It was used for that one little population, and then it sort of made a comeback, and people realized, oh, it puts you into this like starvation mode, and then you shed all this weight. So people like that, because anything that helps people lose weight fast, oh my gosh, that's the best thing in the world. Yeah, I lose weight super fast. My friend lost X amount of weight, and I have to do that too. So, that's really what it is. But it was studied for brain issues, for epilepsy. And then now it's being studied more in people with cognitive decline and things like dementia and Alzheimer's and stuff like that. So brain related. But it became this fad diet that everybody decided was a good idea.
Well, I'm a ketogenic nutritionist, and I promote keto for people who I feel are going to benefit from the diet. I don't say that everybody should be on a ketogenic diet. It really depends on what their current health is, maybe what their family history of disease is, and what their goals are. There have been people where I've said, I don't think keto is for you. Some people who have a hard time processing fat obviously cannot be on a ketogenic diet. But really, for a person who is looking for an anti-inflammatory, anti-aging eating regimen, keto is really where it's at.
At the time of this filming, there is not a lot of long-term research. And I think people think that there is a lot of long-term research when it comes to general health and weight loss, but the historical research on ketogenic diets was epilepsy for children. And now there are more short-term studies that show benefit for a lot of people, but there aren't a lot of long-term studies. And so we're starting to see some of the long-term studies come out on different things because they just didn't exist before. And we're not necessarily seeing 100% great results. So typically when you're doing something really dramatic like that, it's something that we like to only do short-term so that we can get the benefit and then start bringing other things back if that's the route we take at all, because it may not be the best fit for that person.
Keto is a low carbohydrate, high fat eating regimen. Yes, it is. However, if weight loss is a goal and your body knows how to use fat for energy, you wouldn't want to be eating all the fat. You actually need to share the fat with your own fat stores. So for someone in a weight loss situation, they get to eat a little bit of fat, but they want most of the fat coming from their own storage fat. Right, so a lot of people come to me for weight loss, but in my process of educating them, I really share all the research of a ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet really started with trying to reduce epilepsy in children because they found that children in ketosis had less seizure activity than kids that were eating carbohydrates. But since then, the research has grown exponentially in terms of gut diseases or gout or these insulin resistance diseases, cancer, PCOS, neurological conditions. The wave of the future for the ketogenic diet is in neurological and psychiatric diseases. And really, when you think about why that is, your brain is using a cleaner fuel source when it is running on ketones than when it is running on glucose. So you think of all the amazing benefits that your body would have if it's using a cleaner source of energy, kind of like an electric car versus a gas car, right? The whole world is trying to go towards electric cars because it doesn't have as many emissions as a gas-powered car does. It's the same idea with the energy that we're using in our bodies. And that's why really with the neurological and the psychiatric and psychological conditions, if our brain is using a cleaner fuel source, we're not going to have as many negative byproducts that are in our body.
And that's good, right?
That's great. That's why I'm on keto. It's for my brain. And cancer prevention as well, right? Cancer thrives off of sugar, right? When you go detect cancer, you go and get a scan, and they give you some glucose to drink, and then they look to see where the glucose went. Why? Because the cancer cells thrive off of glucose. So think of someone who's trying to prevent cancer, or even people who have cancer. Taking the fuel source away from cancer cells is very, very important, and they can't use ketones for energy.
Doing a diet like the ketogenic diet might be beneficial in the short run for specific populations of people. Could be. And doing it long term for anybody may not be a good thing. There's lots of people out there who just swear by it as a lifestyle and not necessarily, as just a short term thing. That's highly debatable at this point, and there really isn't a lot of research to back that up.
Almost there. There's the grain free, like your body doesn't need any grains at all. And it's, what are you supposed to eat then? It's everything that we eat is grain based or fat based, and it gets really hard. And with the keto, of it not being something that people could just go, it's not an easy life. You have to be completely committed to it. You have to be able to cook. You're not just buying keto food all the time. But is the keto diet something that's just going to be a flash in the pan? We've seen it before. We've seen the Atkins diet. We've seen these things, and people think that they could just like eat bacon and do great. It's all I need is protein and fat, and I'm good. It's like, well, that can't possibly be better than eating a well-balanced diet, in my opinion. I just don't understand how that works. And eating all the super fat, and it's like, yeah, take some cheese and put it on your cheeseburger, and then add some mayonnaise and some avocado, but don't eat a bun. The bun's bad. It's just, that to me, it's hard to wrap my head around. I'm not completely against it, but I know that putting that much fat and grease into your body has got to build up somewhere. It's got to have some sort of lasting to it. And the way that like red meat breaks down so much slower, then I tell everybody to regulate their red meat intake, no matter what your diet is. But there's people that, all of a sudden they start getting gout and they have these heart issues. And I just fear for what these people that are just eating nothing but that all day, every day, and it's part of their diet. And with anything, your body will lose weight initially if you're at the caloric intake. And of course, if you cut out carbs for a month or forever, your body will drop weight. But I'm just not sure how attainable it is and what the long-term effects are. I'll be waiting to see the research on that in a few years.
If you're trying to do the keto diet, let's say, and you're eating a lot of fat, and you're doing well, but then for whatever reason you eat some carbs, you eat something else while you're doing this. Is that like kind of a recipe for disaster?
Well, the standard American diet is already high in fat. So I think it's a misconception that people think, oh my gosh, the keto diet is so high in fat. It's not higher in fat than what the standard American diet is. It's just that we're actually tracking how much fat we eat. A lot of people on a ketogenic diet track what's called their macros. So they know how much fat, carbohydrates, and protein they're eating. In a standard American diet, nobody's tracking that. However, when you combine carbohydrates and fat, as I mentioned earlier, when we consume a carbohydrate, our insulin levels increase in order to shuttle that glucose that's a result of eating carbohydrates into our cells. So once those cells open up, fat can also shuttle in. So you're basically opening up the floodgates for fat to shuttle in when you're consuming carbohydrates and fat together, something like a baked good or a donut or a candy bar. Yeah, Atkins died of a heart condition, but I don't think it was a result of his low carbohydrate, higher fat eating regimen. Keto is very similar to Atkins. Keto is a little bit more vegetable friendly than something like an Atkins. I think Atkins is maybe closer to a carnivore diet, which is really basically all meat and no fruit and vegetables. But I think that the Atkins diet is, as a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, I don't think it leads to any detrimental health effects. And even people who are proponents of the ketogenic diet still believe in the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet was just a little too strict for people to actually adhere to our eating regimen like that.
The other thing I'll say about ketogenic diets, which is a low-carb diet, because you're asking about low-carb diets, is that you can end up with things like electrolyte imbalances because of not having the different minerals. And so they'll tell you, like, well, make an electrolyte drink, stay on your electrolytes so that you don't end up with electrolyte imbalance, because electrolyte imbalances can cause heart palpitations and heart issues. So yes, to a degree that is true. And in fact, they did this study in animals. They're starting to do these studies in dogs because there was this trend of low carb diets in dogs.
I think people think the keto diet causes heart attacks is because we're eating a lot of fat. And thinking back to that study I mentioned about the higher fat, the higher amounts of fat that we eat, the higher our risk of heart disease, which we now know is not actually true. It's hard to change people's thought process about that. And I still have people coming to me worrying about the high fat intake in a ketogenic diet. And there have been studies to show that when you're eating high fat with the absence of large amounts of carbohydrates, you're actually getting more metabolically healthy.
So the hallmark of the ketogenic diet is high fat, low carb. So it's not high fat by itself, but the low carb thing is really key, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to trick your body from having this glucose spike, because that's the thing that's going to keep you in ketosis. So when you're seeing a lot of these keto products that aren't necessarily high fat, they might be high protein or something like that, is that what you'll notice about them is that they are low carb. That'll be the thing that you'll see consistently. But when people stop the ketogenic diet, they usually put the weight back on.
A lot of people think the ketogenic diet is not sustainable for long term because they think that it's too strict. But really, keto needs to be thought of as a lifestyle and not just a diet. And in the beginning, sometimes it's a little bit more strict, but as you live the ketogenic lifestyle, you can loosen up in terms of your strictness a little bit. People feel very, very restricted that they can't eat carbohydrates, but it really is a commitment that you have to make to yourself on whether you want to maintain a healthy body or whether you don't. So it is very, very difficult for people to adhere to the diet long term, but it's really a change in the mindset that will allow you to do that. And focus on things that you actually can eat versus things that you can't eat. We have to be careful with the ketogenic diet and athletes. However, I've had many marathon runners who've come to me to get fat adapted, meaning that when somebody is running a marathon, they can get energy from their own fat, which is a steady source of energy, versus having to drink Gatorade and eat goo all along the way. So for some sports, it's beneficial. For the more quick sports, I think it will be difficult to live off a ketogenic diet. However, I've had a lot of athletes who have come to me to get what we call fat adapted, so they have this constant flow of energy and don't always have to be eating to power through their sport.
So I've tried a lot of stuff. I tried to go keto, and that just, for high-performing people like myself, it didn't really work. I saw the benefits in it, but for me, it's that well-rounded omnivore diet of good fuel.
People are concerned about the fact that maybe we're going to be losing muscle because our protein is being converted to sugar when we're not eating sugar. But that does not happen on a ketogenic diet. And actually, the studies show a maintenance or even an increase in muscle mass on keto, even in the absence of exercise. Getting more metabolically healthy means that our metabolism is functioning at an optimal level. Everything that we're eating and drinking is being converted to energy, and it's not being stored in our body. So the ketogenic diet really allows that to happen. We're not eating a lot of carbohydrates. Our body is using fat for energy. And if you have excess fat stored in your body, the ketogenic diet will allow that fat to be used for energy. We have about 80 to 100,000 calories stored inside our fat cells. And if you don't eat in a way that allows them to be accessed, they will sit there forever. And what the ketogenic diet does is it opens up those fat cells, allows those carbohydrates stored inside those fat cells to be used for energy. And that really is one of the main goals of the ketogenic diet. It's called fat adaptation. We're learning how to allow our body fat to be used for energy versus surviving off of glucose. The difference between the keto diet and the paleo diet is the paleo diet allows the consumption of vegetables grown below the ground, something like a potato or a carrot or a sweet potato. But for the keto diet, that's too many carbohydrates and there's too much starch in those foods. The other difference is paleo does not allow the consumption of cheese, whereas cheese is acceptable on a ketogenic diet.
I've had clients ask me things like, oh, I have so-and-so friend who did this diet or that diet. Keto's been one of them, and they got really healthy, and should I be doing that too? And they say they have so much energy. That's another thing people say with the keto diet is that they feel more energetic. Is that something that I should be doing? And my first question for them is always, what were they eating before?
So in short-term studies of the keto style diet, people lose weight because they can adhere to that for the short term, and they reap all of the benefits of weight loss in doing so. But then what happens 6, 12, 24 months down the line? Number one, by and large, people cannot maintain that style of diet. There is no durability there. But they do maintain that kind of thought process of incorporating a lot of fat into their diets while also now reincorporating the carbohydrates, which results in weight gain, which nullifies all those benefits that they achieved from losing weight. And now you have on board a lot of fat, most of which, again, in our culture is not coming from seeds, nuts, and avocados. It's coming from saturated fat, which then has negative consequences in terms of our lipid profile, our inflammatory profile, as well as, other things.
Oftentimes when people are turning to specific diets with a name, they are turning from a standard American diet and moving into, all of a sudden, they're paying more attention to what they're eating. And so the act of paying more attention to what you're eating and bringing in certain cleaner foods or whole foods, whether that's meat or vegetables, or grains of some kind that are whole grain, all of a sudden they feel better and they go, oh my gosh, the ketogenic diet worked for me. Or, whatever diet, insert name here, worked for me. Then it's like, well, yeah, because you're taking in whole foods, which you weren't doing as much before. It's amazing what can happen when you take in whole foods. So yes, that's the right question.
Yeah, so when I was in grad school at Tufts University and I had my first lecture about insulin, which is this hormone that increases in response to consuming carbohydrates, and it's responsible for helping us get the carbohydrates into our cell for energy, I immediately said, I don't want my body to be going through this crazy roller coaster of sugar and carbohydrates all day long. So at that point, it was about 25 years ago that I went more low carb. There wasn't really keto at that time. The only low carbohydrate eating regimen was something called a low glycemic index diet. That was really a recommendation for diabetics because diabetics are really unable to use carbohydrates for energy anymore. So I was a researcher for many years at a university, and I started my own clinical practice in 2018. And as soon as I started consulting on low carb, keto happened to be one of them. The more I learned about a ketogenic diet, the more I wanted to shout out to the rest of the world that this is going to be the healthiest way that you can eat. So I myself tried it, started in 2018, and I have never looked back. And I now actually only do consulting for the ketogenic diet.
Wow.